was another dark, storm-swept night. Howling wind and rain made the muddy trenches even more unbearable than usual. Lightning flashed through the sky, and thunder took up the crescendo that the big guns had played during the day. Private William McBride huddled in his sentry box, looking out into the darkness of no man's land as he tried to get some shelter from the rain. It was 1916, the middle of the Great War, or the war to end all wars, as some called it. Tonight, though, Willie wasn't thinking of the carnage, of the killing, and the daily hell as men did their best to kill and maim one another. No, Willie's thoughts were on a more pleasant subject. Willie was thinking of home. In his mind's eye, he could see his mother sitting before the fire in the old rocking chair, reading his last letter to her. He smiled as he thought of the fat old family cat curled up on the hearthstone, fast asleep. The image was so vivid in his mind that he could almost hear the creaking of the rocking chair, the crackling of the fire, and the purring of the cat as the warmth of the fire filled the room. Suddenly, a parachute flare lit up the sky brilliantly, causing every man in the trench to duck. Willie threw forward his rifle and scanned the darkness of no man's land, looking, searching for any movement, anything that might signal an enemy attack. The flare hung in the sky, making everything as bright as day for a moment, and Willie tensed, his finger taking up the slack on the trigger. But there was no movement, nothing to dispel the steady pat-pat of the rain. The parachute flare went out. Slowly, Willie relaxed and lowered his rifle. After a few minutes, his thoughts turned homeward again, as he thought of his fiancée, April. To him, she was the most wonderful woman that had ever lived. They had been engaged just before he left for the trenches, and being separate from her made their lonely, dark, muddy trenches seem even more long and unbearable than ever. He reached into his pocket and felt her last letter to him, and he smiled as he thought of what she'd written. She'd said, "Wherever you are in the world, you'll be able to see the same moon that I can. So when you look up at night and you see the moon in the sky, think of me, and I'll be thinking of you." Suddenly, the clouds parted that had been sending their drenching rain, and Willie could see, hanging in the sky, the moon, shining full and bright and lighting up the bloodied and battered battlefield. He smiled as he looked upward despite the rain and thought of April looking at that same moon. "I love you too, April," he whispered into the night. At that same moment, however, on the other side of no man's land, a German sniper caught sight of the glint of the moonlight off of Willie's helmet. Carefully, he lined up his sights, let out a deep breath, and squeezed the trigger. Thunder covered the sound of the gunshot, and Willie McBride never heard the sound of the rifle shot that sent a bullet slamming into his head and killing him instantly. He was dead before he hit the muddy trench bottom. As he lay there, cold and still as the moon was closed over by the clouds, as Willie McBride's soul joined the ranks of the great fallen of 1916. He was only 19, April sighed to herself as she looked down at the picture of Willie. He died nearly 30 years ago, but to me, he'll always be the boy I loved. She sighed again and crossed the room to the window and looked out into the darkness. "And for what, Willie?" she asked. "Why did you have to die? They said you fought in the war to end all wars, but here it is, 1943, and we're in the middle of another world war. Where all the killing and dying The sorrow, the suffering, the glory, the shame. Was it all for nothing, Willie? For boys just like you, it's happening again and again and again, as man does his best to kill his fellow man. Has everyone forgotten, Willie? Was your sacrifice for nothing? As she stood, looking out into the darkness of the night, the clouds parted, revealing the full, bright moon shining down onto the dark world. She looked in wonder for a moment. Then she whispered, "No, Willie, it wasn't for nothing. Not everyone's forgotten. I haven't. I'll always remember my brave, noble Willie McBride." She looked up at the moon again and whispered, "I love you too, Willie."